Questions?
James, the first time in a long time that we saw Keon Wylie active out there in uniform. Two questions there. Is he close to being available for you on a game day? And the second, saw him get a little work with defensive line in those drills. Was that just more of a drill sharpening thing, or was that him dabbling in a couple positions?
No, there's no position change. I'm not sure if that was just a rotation that you saw, but there's no position change. And a timeline, really just whenever he feels like he's ready to go and the trainers and doctors feel like he's ready to go, but he is getting closer.
What could he mean for your linebacker depth at this stage of the season for the
Well,
final
he's
push?
a guy that we were really excited about coming into the season before the injury, so having him back would be helpful on defense and on special teams.
We saw Dani out there after he was limited on Saturday. How confident are you that he could be a full go for this weekend?
Yeah, he felt a lot better this Sunday than he did the previous Sunday, so he was able to play a little bit last week, so having him back would be big.
James, how important is it for guys to be able to play through bumps and bruises at this point of the season, knowing how long the season might be?
Yeah, I think it's really important. That's, I think, part of just kind of growth as an individual football player. Not a whole lot that we can do about it as coaches. Is something they just got to figure out with the trainers and doctors. Everybody's temperament about it is different, but yeah, I think that's just part of growth and maturity as a football player, and knowing the difference and trusting the opinion of the doctors and the trainers of what's something you can't go on and what's something you can. And obviously, there's a ton of examples of that in NFL and college. But some guys, it's their first time having an injury, and they got to figure that out as well. They got to figure out what it's like to kind of work through that process.
Coach, on Monday, when we were talking about how the players were talking to us after the game and kind of their thoughts on rematching and whatnot, you said you were really happy with the way they were handling it. Now that you've had a week of practice, have you seen anything specific that stands out, and maybe how players' attitudes maybe are different, or how players have handled this adversity and coming off the loss?
No, not specifically. No specific examples. I think the most important thing for us is how did we practice on Tuesday and how did we practice on Wednesday, and I thought those practices were good. I think the coaches have been good. Most importantly, we got to get better this week and find a way to beat Washington. We do those things over the next couple weeks, then all the things that we want to do are still in front of us.
Hey, James, is it easier or harder to go up against a team that plays with a lot of NFL influence and a lot of NFL concepts on both sides?
Yeah, I think it really depends, right? Everybody's got NFL influence. Everybody does studies. Everybody talks to people. Everybody does off-season trips or brings people in and does studies. So there's always that influence. But yeah, I think when you got guys that have spent their careers in the NFL, I think there's some challenges that come with that, with facing those types of guys. But I also think there's some challenges for them because you see a lot of different things in the college game that you don't see in the NFL. Probably the worlds are probably closer than they've been historically, probably over the last 5-6 years. But I also think they have challenges coming back to college, and the rule changes and some of the differences and some of the play styles. There can be challenges in both directions.
Hey, James, how close would you say Tyzer Denmark is to potentially getting more active in the rotation for the wide receivers on game day?
Yeah, as you guys know, there's a lot of excitement about him early in camp, and I think there still is. I think we've gotten to a point during the season that we want to make sure, unless there's health reasons, that at this point of the season that we're being strategic about redshirting and those types of things, so that we don't burn a year just this late. So we just got to be strategic and smart about it. But he's a guy that I do think you'll see this year at some point.
Obviously, after KJ went down, the safety room kind of came into a spotlight with getting Dejan up to speed and everything. But the last couple games we've seen maybe a little more Tyrese and not as much Dejan behind Jalen and Zacchaeus. So I guess where do you see that room right now?
Yeah, I don't really see it the way you see it. What you're talking about, I think, is with Tyrese in a goal line package, which is a very specific responsibility that we're asking him to do. But yeah, I think, again, part of it is, like we talked about, it's based on competition, and there's some games where you feel like you can get a younger, less experienced player in there, and there's some games where, you don't feel like it's the right thing to do. You're gonna go with your starters, your experienced guys as long as you can.
James, Omari was a guy that you were excited about coming into the season. He was obviously got off to a hot start. Just 3 catches in conference action. Is there something within this offense, within Omari, that needs to be unlocked or has gone missing? Or is there something you could attribute that to, just considering how hot his start was and essentially not putting up those kind of plays in Big Ten action?
Yeah, I think, there's times where we call shots to him down the field, and it's covered. There's times where we call shots to him down the field, and we get pressure. There's things like that are going to show up, and then there's been some other opportunities as well that we got to get him involved in other ways. But getting our wide receivers more touches and more opportunities is important. But we also have to create more separation, make more contested catches, all those things. It's a combination of all of it. But yeah, we need them involved and we want them involved, and hopefully Saturday will be the weekend. I was hoping this past Saturday that it'd be one of those games where they kind of all came together. We've had a game where Liam was good. We've had a game where Julian made big plays for us. We've had games where Amari has stepped up and Trey. We'd like to get to the point where all of those guys are factoring in on a weekly basis.
James, you talked about not letting one loss turn into 2. What are you emphasizing at the end of this week so you make sure you guys are prepared for Saturday?
Yeah, just focusing on Washington. Making sure, I think we do a pretty good job in Lash building, but they come to press conference and they have, answer your guys' questions, or you're asking me, or they're walking around town, or they're walking around campus. And everybody else is talking about everything but Washington. So for us, we control the things that we can control, and those other things we can't.
James, even before Zion's pick 6 last week, it seemed like he'd been coming on and putting himself in position to make some plays. Where has he made the biggest strides from, say, like the Peach Bowl last year to where he is now to have that growth and development?
I think the biggest thing over the last couple of weeks is confidence. You've seen it on defense. I think it's also translating to him as a punt returner. I saw him more confident on Saturday. He's practicing really well right now. Always been a super athletic guy, a guy that we considered when we recruited him playing wide out, so he's got those types of ball skills. But I think you'll continue to see him trending in the right direction, just practicing and playing at a really high level right now with a ton of confidence.
2 more, guys.
James, how do you feel, you talk about catching some of those contested passes. Just generally, I'm curious how you feel about Drew's role in targeting guys that are contested. How have you felt he's done with selective aggression, or however you coach that?
Yeah, I think if you throw a ball that's tightly contested and we catch it, then it's a good decision. If more times than not in college, if you go through your progression, somebody's going to be open, or you can make a play with your feet. And typically, what I would say is I want to make sure on the vertical, scrambles or the vertical step up in the pocket, if we're throwing a ball to somebody on an in-breaker that's open, then we want to do that every single time. But if it's tightly contested and you can get vertical and go get 4 to 6 yards with your feet, that's valuable rather than throwing a tightly contested ball and out 2nd and 10 or whatever it may be. So it's a combination of both. If you're going to throw a tightly contested ball, it better be very accurate, and we better make the contested catch. If not, then those can become tips and overthrows, and those lead to real bad things.
James, we saw Kaden out there. How close is he to being able to do some things for you, and what would he bring to the table if and when he's able to play?
Yeah, just an experienced guy as a receiver and as a punt returner. Has done some pretty good things. It'd give us another guy to kind of rotate in and consider. His injuries kind of dragged on for a while. That'll be really up to him and the trainers and doctors.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.